If you're out and about at work, wherever you're going today, I pray that it's just a blessed time for you. We're beginning the book of Romans today. Throughout this month, we're going to be studying Romans, looking into its incredible teaching on salvation. That's the first thing I think about when I think about the book of Romans. It has so much density to it. It's a heavy book. It teaches us a lot about how Christ died for us, paid for our sins, and how we can live a new life in Him. But before we get into that, I want to remind you today, let's remember to be in prayer for Danny and Barbara Black. So I say that Romans is a dense book, and that is true even for this passage that we read today. We're looking at Romans 1, verses 1 through 17, which is an introduction to Paul's letter to the Roman church. But even within this, it's pretty dense. There's a lot going on. Paul communicates a lot of different messages here. But I think one of the things that stood out to me the most as I was reading this is the gospel. Paul continually talks about the gospel, which is appropriate because the whole book of Romans is going to be talking about the gospel. The gospel is everything for Paul. You can tell it's his passion. He says right from the very beginning, I was set apart for the gospel message, to preach the gospel, to take it to different places. And at the end of the passage in 16, this is one of the verses that I first memorized when I got saved and when I felt called into ministry. I memorized Romans 1:16. I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes. Paul is not ashamed of the gospel message, though he realizes he's going to face a lot of rejection because of that message from every single direction. He's going to be facing spiritual warfare because of his commitment to this message, but it makes sense that he's not ashamed of the gospel because that's the whole reason Christ saved him and set him apart. That's his whole life now, is this gospel message. One of the verses that really stood out to me, though, was where he said, I can't wait to come to you. I've been trying to come to you, and I'm going to come to you, and I am going to preach the gospel message to you. That stands out to me because he's speaking to Christians, isn't he? And he's writing this letter to people who have already believed in the gospel. Why does he spend so much time teaching about the gospel, and why does he want to come preach the gospel to them? Well, maybe there were some people there, I think, that didn't know the gospel or they hadn't really put their faith in it yet. A possibility, but I think what really is more the heart of what Paul's saying here is that the gospel is so much more than just trusting in it for salvation. We know that's the end goal. We are being saved, we have been saved, and we are on our way to an eternity with Christ. But the gospel message is the power of transformation for us who are his followers. It's what sanctifies us. It's not just what saved us. It's what helps us continue to change in this new life. We need to hear that gospel message. We need to meditate on it. We need to let it have its work in us and its power manifest in us. And so Paul wants to come preach the gospel to them because it's going to lead them into greater obedience as followers of Christ. And I think that's what my simple request is of myself and of you today as we read this introduction and we prepare to read the book of Romans during this month. Let's ask God to use the gospel in that way in our lives as we are studying and meditating on this gospel message. And we know He will transform us into His likeness. We don't need any other program. We don't need any other 12, 13, 14, whatever step program. We don't need a list of disciplines. Those are good things, but what we really need is the gospel message to take hold of us and transform us, and it can and it will. And so I'm excited for what God's going to do in our lives this month as we read the book of Romans, and I pray that it's a blessing to you and to me, and God will use it to transform us. Thank you guys. God